Ladies and gentlemen, everyone around and in between, it is Debate Sensei Limited Preparation Edition. We are talking about things relevant to competitive college level debate in the limited preparation events. All right. Like we found out that nobody took up that niche on YouTube. So we decided to just house that little area right there. So there you
Limited prep the hell out of it.
go.
From the hip.
Yeah.
Right here.
All right. So not only that, but we have little series within series here. Like if we couldn't dissect this any further, this week is our deep dive week, where we pick a topic and they're starting to turn into like topic areas. Sometime I think this is more of a topic area than on a one particular topic, and I think that's a good way to do it sometimes, because then you I don't know, it's just a good perspective to have on it. So I have it with me, Tim Seavey from San Diego State University. Hello, Tim.
Howdy. That way. You're Jared.
Yeah, I'm Jared Kabiga Miller, debate coach, college professor. All right, let's talk about it. The topic area is housing.
I feel like tournament directors have like 5 buckets that they generally pull from in coming up with topics, because like being a tournament director or coming up with topics is a tough job, especially with like IPDA when you got to come up with 40 of them, depending on how many elim rounds you got. So this one, I feel like I'm seeing more and more like housing as a subject. I think comes up more, and it comes in a few variations. So one of which I feel like I see quite a bit is like homelessness. That is a topic that comes up a lot, of like, what does housing look like? Like, what are solutions from like a policy around perspective, or like what should be the philosophy underpinning policy surrounding homelessness or like unhoused folks? How is that challenge addressed? Because it's not getting better. It's getting worse, especially in like major metropolitan places. But then there's so many solutions to it. I like that topic because it seems like different cities or different counties are tackling it in different ways and having varied levels of success, but it is also not a monolith. It's not like one single problem that like you can silver bullet your way to like, oh, this is the one thing that solves it all.
Right.
And I like those debates. It's kind of like climate change. It's like, you can't just, we're going to have more solar panels and therefore everything is all fixed. So you have to right size the harm story that you give to ensure that you can actually solve for that. And then it gets you, having better conversations about like nuance to policy and stuff like that. So I think it's really fascinating and like worthwhile, because it's very tangible and real, and like we all have the capability to actually affect change on that on like a personal level. So on that one, common easy topics I see are things like the state of California or the county of San Diego or the county of Los Angeles should significantly increase its support for the home, or for like homeless persons or unhoused people, or should enact a significant, or should enact a policy to combat homelessness or something like that, or like to rectify the homelessness crisis, or however they phrase it. So I see those topics come up pretty frequently. Out the gate, any like go-to plans or like things that you like have in your back pocket on that subject?
So if we're starting off on, see, like when you're doing topic areas, I think it's good to think, it's like, all right, here's the AFs, and then here's the disadvantages, and then here's like the critiques, and the plans usually have counter plans associated with them. So if we're focusing on like 1ACs right now, if I were to have something in my back pocket, I think we probably have like public housing expansion, or like housing vouchers, as just because they're popular. You know what I mean? It's like, I think that people really should know the stuff that's being talked about. Like, I think the mistake I made when I was competing was I was trying to get so sort of nuanced and new and different and stuff. And that's fun. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, go for it. Yeah. That's fun. That's fun. But maybe it might be like my old age setting in. I'm like, you really should know. I think I would have been a better debater if I would have went for like the more well-known debates about these things. I think the more successful debaters are the ones who gravitate towards where the debates are really happening in the world. And I think public housing expansion is definitely one of those ones.
Yeah, there's I think like a couple of fun stats that I've seen in various rounds, or like I've like prepped students on, that find their way in, and like top of mind, and then they end up actually, like, these stats helpful because they flow across different types of rounds. But for this particular one, there's a stat that there are more vacant units. So it's like houses and apartments. There are more vacant houses and apartments in Los Angeles than there are homeless people. So there are more open spaces that are just and left empty. You know, maybe they're used as like vacation rentals once in a while or vacation homes once in a while. Then there are like, you could house every unhoused person in one shot if all of those, you know, became available. Now it's not like, okay, let's wrest control from people that aren't using their properties, but it's a valuable, you know, locus of issue. Like therein lies a harm. Like there is some uniqueness here that like something is very broken, pointing to like the wealth gap, but also like the ways that homes have become commodities and like financial vessels rather than dwellings and actual like shelter for people that need it. And like what that ends up doing to different edges of the economy. So with that one, Cash for Keys is a project that I like have seen pretty well. So that one I've seen like win some IPDA rounds. It was a really popular program during COVID, and it was like turn hotels into long-term housing as a you know, like a fundamental need. I think, as you say, like public housing expansion is a really good plan area, because I think you've got just kind of like a litany of failed examples in like just, you know, cash or like, you know, outreach programs in mental health or like substance, you know, solutions and things. Like those programs do good in and of themselves, but they're like sustaining solution, I feel like does not tend to track, versus like looking at projects that are housing first instead of like every other solution first. Like if you have to pick one priority first, housing first tend to have the most lasting solution or the lasting impact. So the like someone being permanently removed from unhoused status rather than like a temporary solution. Okay. So I think you're on it with like public housing being, I would say, probably your best priority to start going for.
Yeah. I think there's I think there's multiple things called Cash for Keys, because when I was looking it up when you're talking about it, I'm like, some of these.
So there's a Cash for Keys. It was like with hotels, so you like Cash for Keys San Diego. That one it was like turning hotels that had a lot of vacancy anyways, like the city buying those properties because it's so much more expensive for the city to buy land, go through however many years it takes to like the environmental impact studies and whatever, and get permitting and then build and then like get it zoned even whatever, and then, you know, put the thing together. And it's so many years before people can actually get in, versus hotels are already built, already zoned, already made for dwelling. They've got all the amenities, everything fixed. It's just a matter of ownership. So the city can buy out those, you know, kind of like smaller hotels and turn them into housing.
I think another easy affirmative is rent control.
Sure.
Like that one is, and so like the that, I don't know, that's more preventative than a solution. You know, because it's people who can already afford it, but so it doesn't necessarily talk about like the current and I think more and more you probably want to focus on the current population of unhoused people. It's just growing. You know what I mean? It's like, man, the contrast from when I was a kid till now is amazing. And so, yeah, I think it's something to talk about a lot.
Is something like the last 20 months from the time of this recording, the homelessness has gone up every single month.
Yeah.
Like, and yet it is still, you know, supposedly like one of the top ballot priorities for every elected official. And yet like it keeps getting worse. So I think there do exist some good nonprofits that are actually doing good stuff. I think there are also plenty of nonprofits that are doing like Band-Aid stuff. Not the Band-Aid stuff isn't important, because like people need food, like soup kitchens are critical assets, right? Like even if they don't sustainably solve homelessness, like it is still a really, really important asset to a community, but it's not the same thing if the harms that you're stating, like homelessness is on the rise, it's getting worse and all these things, to, you know, fully solve that. Like you need a sustainable solution. And that's where also I've seen good plans for just rezoning. I love that these are like generally unsexy plans. Like you're not doing something big and crazy and wild, but they do address like real bureaucratic issues. So the fact that like, you know, high rises are zoned exclusively for business use. But you look at like many big cities right now, and their high rises are fucking empty. Like they are empty because people don't need commercial real estate. Like COVID really changed the need for people to be in office. And that's not even like companies going back in office. It's not the same that it was. So when people, you know, moan and groan about like, oh, commercial real estate's bad right now, like that could be rezoned into something different. Like the straightforward examples, like you look at like the streets of San Francisco and how much homelessness there is, literally next to how empty these giant high rises are. Like, is no one else seeing this opportunity? Like, you've got, you know, a bunch of investment bankers that are going up and down like elevators past 30 empty floors, and right outside the building are tons of unhoused folks. Like, that seems like an opportunity. Like, therein is, you know, power and water and, you know, heating and air and like basic functions that are actually able to sustainably solve something. So rezoning, I think, is another good one. That it's not like a silver bullet, but it does start to get to some pretty solid solutions quickly, I feel like.
Yeah.
Like back in some other programs.
The rent control one that I was mentioning earlier, it suffers from like really different results. Like when you start researching it, it's not like it seems to have a single outcome. Because I mean, I'm seeing stuff from San Francisco saying that rent control kind of had the opposite effect. So if you don't do it well, that it still leads to less like rentable spaces and even accelerated gentrification.
Sure.
So like those are some of the best debates where like the data is unclear, you know. That's where you need the most sort of critical thinking to happen, because you know you got to kind of wade through some difficult data you know, to kind of get to a conclusion.
And so I think that for the affirmative or the negative, I think this is an important debate, like more than most, to pin burdens down, to like have a criteria that's more than just doesn't do more good than harm, like have something specific and tangible here. So like the amount of, you know, like make the burden being, or like the criteria for weighing the round be like, you know, 5+ years of sustainable housing, right? Like, whoever can solve that, like whoever's solution leads to that, because I think that starts to really change your results, right? Like, you know, short-term temporary things that like did pop up during COVID, that is not the same when it was like a hotel vouchers, for example, not quite the same as the state, as like the city or the state or county buying the hotel. So those two things already are kind of divergent, but they're also then lies some like interesting counterplans that you can take, like, okay, do this plan, but actually just a little bit different, and here's why it would come out better. So if you can find case studies of like some of these popular things of when they haven't worked, and figure out like there are smart people that work in cities that are trying to solve these problems, but just facing a lot of red tape, look those up, and you get the magical wand of fiat in debate land. So like use that to, you know, say like, hey, let's overcome this thing, and then talk about what that would look like. I think that those are some of, like, in my opinion, like the most valuable debates, because they feel the most proximal and real. It's not just like, oh, nuke war and geopolitical posturing and whatever. It's like, this is affecting us right now, and like people that we know and in our communities. And like it's very real and tangible.
I have some trouble, like if it's just a topic area, I have some trouble coming up with disadvantages, like really general disadvantages that I mean, like it seems like they're all economic to some degree. Well, I mean, I guess they could be political, but like,
you know, I mean, you also get kind of critical with it. So I think like the common ones are like the state.
Well, yeah, that's what I meant. Like disadvantages, I wasn't counting the critiques. Yeah. So, but still, like you got to know those economic ones, because like housing is a major like factor in the economy and how people behave within the housing sector, especially like owners. Like you can't just ignore that, you know, just say that, or it doesn't matter, or you know, it's like it's, I don't know, you could eventually, because like I think like the rent control example is a good one, where it's not enough to have good intentions. You actually have to have good policy. You know what I mean? It's like like I think rent control comes with good intentions, but if you don't know how to implement it, then it could actually be worse. You got to be really like good with it, you know what I mean? And so those economic disadvantages could almost be like case turns, right? That's kind of what you're going for, because like housing is like essentially economic. It's like you have to have an economic solution for an economic problem, and so yeah.
The So away from like the unhoused, right, like side of
Yeah.
like the housing debate, I think there's also popular ones that are like even more strictly economic. Like there's still absolutely like people components to them, but they become even more like macroeconomic as topics. So some of them seeing more and more are like institutional buying of private residences or of single family residences. So like what a problem that is. And then just yesterday I saw there's a thing in the Wall Street Journal that came out about like legislation that's trying to combat that. So like the amount of money that institutional investors, like big money, like $110 billion in 2022 was earmarked for purchasing single family homes and renting them out. Because it's a really stable, reliable, predictable asset compared to like the stock market or whatever. Like people need places to live. And as soon as it's like, hey, the free market's the only rules here, and so, you know, hedge funds can spend hundreds of billions of dollars on this, like, yeah, they're going to win. And so I think the harm stories like single family or like first time home buyers, for example, like can't get it, or like just generationally, right? Like individuals purchasing homes is way down just because it's so much less affordable. Those you have to tell a bigger economic story of like why that actually ends up bad at a macro level, like why, you know, permanent renting has negative macroeconomic implications.
Yeah. But then I'm starting to think of like, what would be solutions to that?
So the policy I like a lot. Be it known on the internet that I support this policy that is been posed. It's called. It was posed in the House. Excuse me. So they're talking about it. That is, it's more or less like the bill's titled exactly what it is. It's like limit institutional investment in single family homes, or I think it's called like take back single family homes for institutional investors or something. And it basically lays out a plan that like over a certain size of investor of like companies have to divest themselves from single family homes entirely within 10 years. Like they've got a 10-year runway to like sell all of their inventory. I kind of like the 10-year runway because like maybe you could like counterplan your way and say like, oh, it's 2 or something. But I like that runway because I think it gets you out of the like shock to the system disadvantages. But it means that like there will be more inventory available on the market. Like I think it's like a pretty straightforward function. You can talk about like interest rates are really high, inventory is really low. That means that, you know, your regular person is kind of screwed in trying to buy a single family home right now. And you pull a lever on one of those, like the Fed's not changing interest rates all that much. And even if they do, inventory is still crazy low. So if you can pull the other lever of like, let's make there be more inventory, good, do it. Like, I like those debates that the.
I think you're freezing up on me. All right.
Sorry.
I'm sitting there spitballing like what my counter plan would be on something like that. What, just limit? Okay. I guess I mean you have to go with solvency a little bit first about the ability, like who gets to own it? So only individuals get to own it? Is that what you're saying? A house of some degree? Can you hear me? Oh, maybe
yeah,
not.
I think it's the idea. Yeah, or it's like investors under a certain size, like they have to have a portfolio of like fewer than 10 homes or something.
Okay. See, I'm wondering if like because one idea I was just kind of spitballing off the top of my head is like if we're able to identify these large companies, then maybe a company over a certain size has to provide a portion of their inventory for public housing. That'd be cool.
Yeah. And I think those ideas are posed. I think it's like how enforced they really are, which granted, like enforcement's a good question to pose to any given policy. But I think that's the status quo. Like for every permit granted for new housing, a percentage of it is mandated by the county, city, state, whatever, for affordable housing. In San Diego County, for example, I want to say it's 10%. Like for every new permit that a company gets, like, hey, we're going to build 100 units of like high income, whatever, 10% of that has to also go to develop affordable, like lower income housing. So like it feels like it's non-unique, and it feels like they're doing everything they can to skirt that anyways.
Okay. like this always, man, you are ripe for just a politics disadvantage straight up on something like this, because this would be a touchy issue. This definitely starts getting into the I call them like right wing critiques, you know what I mean, of communism and socialism and things like that. But there are some, I think there are some interesting sort of more traditional critiques that are implicated by any housing topic, any topic that you can start thinking about. And really easy one would be like anthropocentrism. Anytime you're talking about housing, I mean, you're really talking about like humans should deserve to get to occupy this space, and all other organisms do not. You know what I mean? Unless we give them permission.
Yeah.
You're talking about more and more territory.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I think that's one of the better sort of debates that I would like to kind of work out. You know what I mean? I see where it goes and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, the amount of resources that go into, like, natural resources that go into every home, they're not good for the environment, that's for sure.
Yeah.
They're not good for any critter except for, like, some humans.
Yeah. So it'd be weird to, I don't know. That is where it's one of the clearer examples on why so many people call for alternatives in critiques. Right? That's the big. So you say it's like, all right, the critique is well said. All right, it's been well received. I understand the anthropocentrism argument, and it's a very good one. But what's the alternative? I mean, there are real people that are houseless, like, and so like, are you saying that we can't increase housing for people without houses, for the other environment, part of the environment, like, I think that, I don't know. I think that's one that gives a really good sort of like human face on like lacking an alternative if you're running a critique. How you doing, Sam? You still with me?
We used to go with deep. Yeah, I'm still here, but I'm sorry that the internet connection is pretty laggy. Our alternative that we would run on that critique was deep ecology, and it was that every single life, and I think we had like an animal kingdom type of word for it. It was like anything of the genus this, or maybe we would just say it was like any single life is equally valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And just trying to level the playing field, and like people would be like, you're trying to tell me that a mosquito.
I heard mosquito. All right. I think I could fill it in.
Sorry, my
telling me
connection's
that
super rough right now.
mosquito has just as much value as a human life.
Right, and we'd be like, ha, exactly, you are part of the problem. Like, you saying that you are more important than any other critter, like, that is a slippery slope to every single kind of, like, subjugation of other life, including like other humans, and like creating this hierarchy is why we have a problem and why we're decimating the earth, etc. Like like the food chain is as far as it goes of like life valuing other life, but like we're just doing it for fun now, or like for sport, or just for an extra house or whatever. Like we have absolutely no regard for life, and that's the problem. So that was kind of like the narrative we would get into, of like every single life is equally valuable.
Okay.
We did get kind of smacked down one time though, when someone was like, okay, so what about antibacterial soap?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, okay.
Oh man. So the anthropocentrism one, I think look, we haven't flushed it out, but I think that one could be flushed out easily, right? I think there would be a whole lot of really awesome discussions that would come out of that. Yeah. What else? Well, you could get into colonialism because it's like, places to live. I mean, like I don't know. If you're going more of a gentrification, I think like you could probably get a gentrification, but that's starts to seem a little bit more disadvantagey to me. I'm pretty sure you could probably develop a link for gentrification no matter what your housing policy is. No matter what, there's a there's a narrative on how it probably has led to that in the past. Like you could find evidence where it's happened before, like the rent control example from
Yeah. Neocolonialism is the other response that we'd have with that, where it's not countries taking other countries and their people. It's like large corporations taking resources and controlling access to those resources.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very similar argument, but run in a different way, and it's a little more like modern theoretically.
Yeah. I mean, you could. I'm putting in some stuff in the ChatGPT, and it's giving me some fairly basic stuff like neoliberalism critiques on how using market-based solutions, like the 10% thing that you're talking about. It's like, okay, we're gonna we're gonna subsidize the profits, or we're gonna use the profits to subsidize housing and stuff like that. That those things, you can critique that as the fundamental way in which you're trying to solve things. And so like the sort of profit driven thing is only sort of like codified and ossified in our system by doing that way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that one too. I think like you can just have some more like classical arguments on this, as you were saying, like the more like traditional critiques, I think still kind of fit with that one. Some of the stuff that I see is just about like us on the grander topic of housing is just like the way that housing should be treated. Like, urban sprawl, for example, has been like a problem from an environmental standpoint, but also from like an economic standpoint. Like, what does it do to the economy, or what does it do to like politics when you have just like densely packed urban areas and then not really much suburban area? Like, what does that impact? So I think there's some fun like dialogue to be had between any of those things. And then like the fact that I think like COVID is more modern times cool examples of it, where everyone wants to leave the densely packed city, and then it ends up like I don't know if it's not really urban sprawl anymore, but it's like the takeover of what is traditionally like rural areas. So you look at like Sun Valley, Idaho, and like a bunch of Twin Falls, and like these places that are traditionally really small towns that have just like completely been overrun by people that just like adore or romanticize the like small town, and then build crazy infrastructure. Like it just gets completely flooded, and then it's just like another little mini San Francisco or whatever was just left. And I think there's like a bunch of examples of cities like that around the country, and it's like, is that like our own little micro national version of colonialism? Like, oh, we're going to show this town what having real big city things is like.
Yeah. I'd like to know a few more examples like that. I think I haven't really delved into it that much. Now, there is one argument that I don't know, I've heard a lot of, and the more I hear it, the less sense it makes to me, but it's still really predictable. And that's about like market distortion. Like, public housing will result in market distortion, or, like these, like, and I'm like, I don't understand what's wrong with distortion. Like what, like, like
I think that's a fancy way of saying like rich people interacting with poor people. Like, I think that's what that means. I think if I heard that in round, I'm pretty sure that's what I would respond with.
Yeah, like I don't know, they just something about like having a pure markets is like inherently good, and I've never heard it quite explained to me on why it's inherently good, because there's a lot of times where I think distortion is awesome. They like it's a great addition to the original, you know what I mean? It actually makes things better. And so just saying like market distortion is like, this isn't how the market should act. I'm like, well, like how should it act? It's supposed to result in all these homeless people. Like, like that's
and also who's to say what it should and shouldn't be like?
Yeah, like I don't know. You just kind of like, I don't understand why there's a whole bunch there, like why the major investment companies going in and snatching up all those houses, why that's not considered distortion. You know,
Oh,
like
sure,
that seems
right.
to be pretty good distortion to me. Doesn't seem like how the market's supposed to work. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's a deep topic. It's relevant. Like, I think it impacts a ton of people, and it feels very proximal. So I kind of like the impact of that as a subject area. But housing is a cool one. So I think it's worth just keeping up on in the news and, you know, knowing having some good arguments in your back pocket, plans, disadvantages, etc., that relate to it.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's a major economic indicator, so you should look into it. All right, I think that does it for us. We are Tim, Jared for Debate Sensei. We'll see you in the future.